Hi, my name is Marcus Schmidt. I'm with Intrado's product management team, and I'm joined by my colleague, Andy Gibson.
Thanks, Marcus. Andy Gibson, also part of product here. I look after everything Microsoft related at a technical level for Marcus, based in the UK.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to be with you all today to spend a little time talking about what we're seeing in the industry and what we're seeing specifically related to Microsoft and Microsoft Teams. So Andy, as we all know, it's been quite a year. Over the last year, we didn't even have Enterprise Connect last year because of the pandemic. So I'm just curious, as you look back over the last 12 months or so, things that stood out to you in general, and then maybe with Microsoft Teams in particular.
Yeah, well, where to start when it comes to the phenomenal growth of Teams? I'm one of the 250 million daily active users that Microsoft announced. That number just seems to go up and up month on month and has done for the last couple of years, even pre-COVID. But obviously we know COVID changed the way the whole world worked. And I find it humorous at times when I look at back years ago where I've come from in my career, and with one eye always on UCaaS and what that means for collaboration, and seeing the opportunity and recognizing that opportunity in such a small time span has been absolutely crazy. But in the last 18 months, I've gone from, what do you do, Andy? What does your work do again? To my mother-in-law using Teams on a daily basis, to my friends who are personal trainers running their business remotely. Now, unfortunately, I've had to attend funerals over Microsoft Teams in the last 12 months. But at the same time, I've attended my kids' graduation from primary school over it. So really, it does show what remote collaboration makes possible. And Teams is front and center of all of that. And it's not going to slow down. You look at what Microsoft are doing with Windows 11 going forward, and Teams is going to start becoming part of that as standard. That 250 million number is going that way and that way only to start with. So yeah, so as far as Teams is concerned, incredible product. I think we all know how quickly it's grown within Microsoft, and they'll keep pushing that momentum. Some other very interesting things we've seen from Microsoft though recently, obviously the announced price rise of Office 365. I know most people hear price rises, there is pick up, and it's panic. I'm of a personal opinion that this one is actually a justifiable one. Price has been pretty static with Office 365 for a very long time, and a lot more value has been added into the stack in that time as well. They're adding more value in that with audio conferencing inclusive as of, let's say, March next year, as well as other solutions, other facets of the product. So that one, I don't feel cause for panic, but I do expect a lot of customers to sit back and actually take notice of what they're doing from a licensing perspective, how they buy it, what they utilize. Maybe it gives rise to actually, let's reevaluate this. Should I be committing long-term in my commitment? Should I be buying in more flexible means like CSP? And then obviously there's what's kept me busy personally for the best part of the last 9 months, and that's Operator Connect. So we look at where Microsoft have been in their voice story. It started with their own calling plans in Skype and Teams. It has direct routing, so allowing customers to bring their own SIP trunks and deploy on-prem SBCs and maintain their own voice infrastructure working with Teams, through to the carrier solutions that companies like Intrado have been providing for 2 years plus now. And now that evolves further to blend all those worlds together into Operator Connect. So we're able to provide our own flexible dial plans, commercial models, world-class support, but keeping it simple to consume, simple to manage. And when you're looking at a telephony strategy that has migrated from the legacy on-prem or other cloud PBX vendors, consolidating that down into Microsoft Teams, simplicity and quality of support, I think, are massively integral to the success of that.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you're saying. I think it's what Microsoft is doing with Operator Connect and Operator Connect conferencing is really testimony to, and also an accelerator of, the whole Microsoft Teams calling wave, right? As people started using Teams and they started using it for basic collaboration, exchanging some messages, basically like instant messaging, slightly more on steroids. And then they said, well, I can collaborate with documents on this, and I can start having meetings on this. And then they realize I can stop calling on this. And then they look to Microsoft and they realize that maybe some of their options are limited within the native Microsoft calling plans or the native Microsoft audio conferencing plans. And my hat's off to Microsoft for actually realizing that and opening up those environments with Operator Connect and Operator Connect conferencing. So, folks like us can come in and add the value that we've traditionally done over the years. So what do you, as customers start down that journey of, okay, I've used Teams for messaging, I've used Teams for meetings, I'm starting to think about Teams for calling, I want Teams to be my PBX replacement. What are some of the things that they need to think about, or that we've seen customers think about, or we've helped customers think about as they embark down that road?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you deploy any voice solution, there are pitfalls to look out for, and everyone should be mindful of that. Now, luckily, that there are ways to plan for these types of things, but I've already mentioned about the licensing, etc. So it's not just what do I need to add on to my licensing to enable Teams for voice services and other things. It's what am I doing with my licensing today? I mentioned CSP. We actually see a significant amount of customers we work with in a consultative capacity oversubscribing. And that oversubscribing is okay if you've got a small buffer, but others, that buffer can be fairly significant. And there's instant cost savings to be made there, which is incredibly important to any business at any time. But you can add to that a little bit. Okay, I've got the right number of licenses. Do I have the right type of licenses? Am I giving someone an E3 when in actuality they only ever use the functionality of an E1 or even an SMB plan of Microsoft? Can I utilize that too? Can I mix and match across the two? Well, absolutely, you can. So that's where, again, we can step in and help the customer, not just from a voice service perspective and voice licensing, and helping them recognize the potential of Teams to we can migrate everything into one singular unified package. But add on to that, really, we just want to save you money in general. But you'll go forward, and this is one thing that we will hopefully start to see as the world starts getting back to normal more and more. We're already in a better place than we were 6 months ago. Let's hope that trend continues. But Teams escalations coincided with a work from home strategy and a forced work from home strategy. So the corporate network hasn't really been stressed at this point. Home ISP has instead. The worst problem I have with Teams networking is I have to compete with Netflix and Fortnite. That's not an issue. But when I suddenly have a couple of hundred users returning to one office, and they're all now used to using video, all now used to remote collaboration, desktop sharing, what's that going to mean to my corporate network? And that's just one office, never mind the larger WAN, the larger corporate hubs, our data centers, etc. So that's planning for that return, I think, is going to be key, not just from a COVID perspective in terms of social distancing, shared devices, shared workspaces, but can my network cope with this and the impending workload that's coming back to it?
Yeah, I would agree with that entirely. I mean, it's one of those things where customers that left the workplace a year and a half ago, well, people were maybe using some video in some rooms sometimes, but now everybody's using video all the time for all things, right? And you'll always have some employees probably that aren't in the office and they're remote, so you want to make sure they're included. So I think, yeah, the network is something that a lot of folks may be overlooking. So that's a really good call out. What about with the employees themselves? Like as the employees start to have that mix of some in the office, some not in the office, people start using Teams more. What are you seeing with our customers and their employees themselves, and what kind of things they need?
Yeah, well, I believe I can see hot desks becoming more of a common concept going forward. Like not everyone will be in the office at the same time initially. Now, then there is the case of, okay, do we have shared devices? Do I want that old desk phone on there and be responsible for the maintenance, the management of that device at a firmware level, but also the cleaning of that device, that desk, and shared? I believe more and more people will start adopting a soft phone first strategy. So this is my personal device that I've got stuck on my ear, and I will use it with whatever soft phone client I need to at the time, predominantly Microsoft Teams. So that's one of them from a personal device, but it also gives rise to personal video devices. We see a lot of our users will join Microsoft Teams meetings through a Cisco DX unit, as an example, because we've always had those. So we've had the hardware, it works with Teams through the CVI, one touch join. It's a fantastic user experience. That sort of methodology will continue to expand as well, I believe. And what's going to happen in the meeting rooms themselves? Those legacy video devices will continue to sweat those assets because of services like CVI. But in time, will that legacy device by vendor X be replaced by a Teams room system? We know that's the intent with CVI being a means to an end of sweating those assets and getting there. So the infrastructure within the office will definitely start to change as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's some exciting Teams room systems developments coming down the pipe, and we've worked with Poly. I know we've done some work with Yealink. We've done some work with audio codes, and I happen to have a Lenovo device on my desk, their little Think Smart View, which is kind of a handy little way to join Teams meetings. So yeah, I think there's a lot of innovation happening in that ecosystem for sure. So what about the more like the not so exciting stuff? The day in, day out telephony requirements for people, especially when you get into international locations. You're in the UK, I'm in the US, we have colleagues all over the world, a lot of our customers are multinational. What are the scenarios there that customers have to consider as they roll voice out in more of a global fashion?
Yeah, that's a great question, something that I personally contend with on an almost daily basis. So Microsoft have done a great job themselves just expanding their own country footprint. I believe it's 38 countries now that they can offer their own calling plans to, but they are still very reliant and very supportive of their operator partners like Intrado to help customers find a solution in countries that are more problematic, and even in those common countries as well. Just because a solution is available in one country doesn't necessarily make it the right solution, be that technically or commercially or for any other reason. So we very much embrace that methodology, that culture within Intrado. If a customer is looking for a number in a country we can support, which will be 60 plus numbers by end of year, great, we will look to deliver that through Operator Connect, and we provide everything for that customer. We are the SBC as a service, we are the calling plan, we are your carrier, your operator. But we also recognize customers have their own relationships in country, whether that's a country we can deliver in, whether it's a country Microsoft can deliver in, or whether it's a country that sits by itself outside of our purview and Microsoft's. In those instances, we allow the customer to leverage those existing carrier relationships, and we can enable Teams for those, still managing the relationships. We're responsible for the integration of carrier X into Teams. It's using our infrastructure to do that. I did a very interesting deployment in Malaysia with exactly that recently. It's a customer is predominantly US based. They wanted to buy a couple of thousand seats of US calling with us, but they needed 100 users deployed in Malaysia. They already had a SIP trunk there. We worked with them, and we were up and running in just a few days. It's a very impressive deployment, very elegant solution for them. And it fit in with their commitment to their existing carrier. They couldn't migrate away from that for a couple of years. So we continue to allow them to utilize that agreement.
That's awesome. That's one of the beautiful things I think about the Microsoft Teams telephony approach, is that ability to mix and match those different providers, right? And still have the consistent experience for the customer, for them, the customer's employees. One of the other things I hear from time to time, and I'd love your perspective on this as well, is customers not only wanting to maintain their existing telephony relationships, but potentially maintaining their existing PBXs for a point of time, right? As maybe it's a migration where they're going to move from one PBX to Microsoft Teams on a location by location basis over time, or maybe there's some functionality that older PBX has that Teams doesn't have yet. Curious about what are we doing to approach that kind of problem, and how do we help customers there?
Yeah, and there's absolutely valid use cases for that as well. I mean, it might be that PBX is built into a customer's line of business applications. It might have functionality that Teams doesn't yet support. And while, as we look to the future, we anticipate that Teams will become everything in that hub, absolutely, if a customer mandates that the PBX needs to be in the flow, we can still do that as well. There's a few different ways we can do that for the customer. The simplest way is we can act as a registered endpoint against it. Effectively, Teams just becomes a phone that hangs off the back of the PBX as if it's a plug-in device or another soft phone client. Most elegant way of doing things. But for other more complex scenarios, then we can connect a SIP trunk between the two. So effectively, call comes in from the PSDN to the PBX, out to the trunk to us, and then we'll take it to Microsoft. We've actually done exactly that for a bank recently in the US. That's growing and growing functionality. We did that with Cisco Call Manager. Again, very elegant solution. It's going down very well with their users, all of whom were hit by, okay, I've used Jabber historically, but I want to start using Teams. Okay, well, we'll allow both. This is not a hard cutover. Here's Jabber, here's Teams, and we can start that migration. And eventually, as they build faith in Teams as a soft phone, it will become the primary, and that migration will shift across.
Exactly. Yeah, it gives people that ease of migration and nothing that's being forced to happen in any given timetable. Awesome. So once you get a customer squared away on the core, voice system, the core calling scenarios, what are some of the things that happen next? Some of the things that we're either helping customers with now or things that we're anticipating to help customers with in the future. Once they kind of get that foundational calling capability going, what do you see some of the customers asking for or looking for next?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I speak to our client success teams here, Teams and voice deployments are kind of fundamental to our messaging, but absolutely day two, there is a lot more you can do with Teams than just that. So a lot of our customers are already using it for IM, for meetings. Are they using it for bespoke application integration? Have they considered governance? Okay, what does it mean to have Teams and have everything accessible and shared? Yes, you can trust your partner network. Yes, you can trust your users, but it doesn't help them a bit further to secure that data. So we have change management services to help with those strategies. We have solutions like Intrado Learning, and that allows us to provide a Teams integrated LMS that will talk to everything in the M365 stack, not just Teams itself. We want users to have advice on SharePoint, how to set up SharePoint, how to use SharePoint, even how to use Word or Outlook, things that many of us take for granted. If you have a help desk agent responsible for that, so someone in IT getting called saying, how do I do this? And you can refer them to a internal LMS, a very affordable Teams integrated one. It makes a lot of sense very, very quickly. And because it is an LMS as well, you can have targeted learning plans. You can start working this. You can assign, okay, HR, this is how you should be using Teams. This is what we feel is beneficial to you. Sales, this is what you should be doing. Operations, this is what you should be doing. You can carve out very bespoke learning plans for them. I mentioned meetings. Meetings is very dear to my heart. It's where I spent an awful lot of my career here in the 17 years I've been with Intrado. We will see the utilization of Teams continue to expand there as well. I have no doubt about it. We look at Teams VoIP, Teams native conferencing, and we look at how that adapts to low bandwidth, how it handles echo cancellation, the general quality, the video quality, all superb. We look at still there is a need for PSTN conferencing. Obviously, Microsoft are making that part of their enterprise and their small business SKUs as of next year. And then we look at Operator Connect conferencing as well, which will help fill those gaps for toll-free, for countries outside of the Microsoft reach, for dial-out and on-net dial-out as well for customers. So really, there's going to be a solution for everything. And then there is CDI on top of that. So cloud video interoperability. Again, I have a Cisco unit sat in my office, and when I come back, I still want to use that with Teams. Okay, I'll absolutely still be able to do that.
Yeah, I think that the meeting stuff is only going to get more and more predominant as people start to realize that is just everybody's coming off this way of meeting. So this meeting mode that we're all in with video is just going to continue, right? It's not going to go back. I don't see people going back to just plain old ordinary dial-in conference calling anytime soon, right? They're used to this type of experience, be able to see their colleagues, face to face. What else? What are some of the other things that we're seeing customers looking at after they get sort of the basic set of meeting and calling capabilities down?
Yeah, well, I suppose after that, you could take everything that applies to the non-Teams world as well and look at even traditional PBX. So you've got compliance recording. There's some industries, some horizontals that require that every inbound, outbound communication be logged. If you have a PBX that may support that today, you might have a contact center that supports that today, and you're moving this functionality to Teams, you're not going to lose the ability to handle compliance recording. So there are certified vendors out there that we work with that allow everything within a Teams session to be captured. So it's not just the voice now. It's also the content sharing. It's also the video. So think about that logically. If I'm trying to make sure I don't tell Marcus something and I can just write it down on a piece of paper and hold it up to the camera, video recording can be quite a significant point of interest there. So absolutely cool recording will fall in place. Then you've got some of the legacy analog stuff as well. Yeah, it's a digital world now, but we know there are pockets of analog devices out there, whether that is doorbells, overhead pages, etc. They are not natively designed to work with Microsoft Teams, but we can allow them to work within a Teams-centered solution. So we provide analog device registration through our cloud SBCs. We can provide numbers to those, so we're not orphaning them out. If we're looking at taking your users into Teams, we want to make sure that you're not having to maintain a separate service just for those other devices. And fax is a classic example of that as well. So we can look at eFax solutions becoming more and more popular. It starts to remove the legacy device. We know faxing is still almost a mandatory requirement in some industries. We want to make sure that that is still serviceable, attainable in the Teams world. You've got disaster recovery. Okay, in an ideal world, nothing ever fails. I'm coming off the back of myself of a 2-day ISP outage, so I know stuff does unfortunately break occasionally. When it breaks, what do? I don't want my business to be interrupted. So we have the ability to provide DRS services. If I'm providing you a phone number and someone calls your number, it should ring to the device you want it registered with. And 99.9% of the time, if we're adhering to Microsoft's own 3.9 SLA there, it will get to Microsoft Teams. The one occasion it doesn't, you shouldn't be missing that call. So we can allow a user to register, say, their cell phone against it. So if we cannot place that call into Microsoft, we'll send it, we'll fork it immediately out to your cell phone or any other registered device. So you're still going to receive those inbound calls. You've got how people have different types of roles use the telephony system as well. I use it to call colleagues, to call partners, but you can have executive assistants and receptionists that are consuming multiple inbound calls and routing them correctly day to day through their contact center. So we need an attendant console. We need to make sure that when that call is placed, the receptionist can handle that, route it accordingly. And things will evolve in that space further as well. I've no doubt, you'll have things like skill-based routing for within Teams. You'll have dynamics integrations. You can see, okay, this user has called before. I can see they spoke to this person. I can see this person's available. I can route to them, or they're not available. So who's their backup? Oh, Marcus is the backup, so I can route to Marcus instead. And it's just making sure that all the functionality is still available. We're not losing anything. In fact, if anything, we're gaining and adding to it because we're just bringing more and more of the Microsoft stack into place.
Yeah, I agree. I think that scenario you touched on there at the end, that scenario with Dynamics, the Dynamics 365 product, it's some people kind of overlook it in the broader Microsoft portfolio, but it's a big growing business for them, basically to provide business applications for customers. And some of those are their CRM systems and their customer support systems and their sales automation systems and all of that stuff. And I know Microsoft themselves have been investing a lot in sort of the integration of Teams with Dynamics and how those scenarios come together. So I think you've hit upon an interesting thing to watch as we go into the future as to how that world blends together and you get the whole greater than the sum of the parts, right? So you got all this value in Teams, you had all this value in Dynamics, and all this value from partners like Intrado. And as you bring that together, there could be interesting scenarios that pop up that really we weren't able to do in the past. One of the things that I know you like as well. So I'm going to ask you to kind of look into the future a little bit. There's some other cool stuff that Microsoft has with their Power Automate platform, how you can get these things to work better together, even if you're not a developer, right? As I think Microsoft uses the term citizen developer. People can do low code, no code kind of integration and automation using all of those different things. And there's some other interesting stuff coming out with, you mentioned Windows 11, what Windows 11 is going to have with Microsoft Teams, a consumer version of Microsoft Teams. But what are the kinds of things as you look into the next 12 months, are you excited about and want us all to keep an eye on?
Yeah, well, I'm very excited to see how Operator Connect conferencing pans out, especially how that aligns to the inclusive Microsoft conferencing. Operator Connect calling in general, I think is one of the most exciting things I've worked with Microsoft in the last 5+ years. The ability for customers to have that commercial control. I want to be able to buy from vendor X, but not suffer a management consequence as a result of that. I'm not increasing the complexity to maintain that service. It's very much kind of click, purchase, assign, as if I'm just managing my 365 tenant organically. It will become that simple. So we're investing heavily in terms of making sure that that user journey is consistent across all our Microsoft integrated services. So our goal is to have a single pane of glass where a customer can come and they can buy their Microsoft licensing. They can assign those licensing to users. They can buy phone numbers from us and assign those phone numbers to users, all without breaking out elsewhere. Once they've got all that deployed, you then have visibility of what does utilization look like? Who are my power users? Who's the one racking up all the international charges on my account? And how can I teach them to more efficiently utilize Teams to drive further cost savings? Or here's access to Intrado Learning to help them with that. And here's a customized learning plan for it as well. So really, customer self-service and Teams adoption and change management will be absolutely paramount for us as we go into 2022. And as we start to build upon some of the work we do in the calling space as well, we look at what our fraud prevention teams have done for years, protecting our customers, protecting our investments as well, and seeing how that can expand into the 365 space. Because we're in a situation now where if we were dealing with traditional telephony and something was compromised, it's a direct cost risk to the customer. Calls could be getting placed and charges increases as a result. With Teams and Microsoft 365 in general, if you're compromised there, you have a lot more at risk. Your data is compromised, your customers are compromised, and everything needs to be protected. So M365 security is massively important for us also. And we're very intrigued as well just finally to see the consumer Teams implication, right, in Windows 11. And what happens there when it's just there and everyone's desktop, as if it's not pervasive enough, it's just going to be at everyone's fingertips.
Yeah, that'll be really, really interesting. I'm looking forward to upgrading my machines to Windows 11 as soon as it comes out. I don't know if I'll do the pre-release yet. I'll probably wait for the actual release version, but it'll be interesting to see how that consumer Teams also influences the business Teams application that we all use. At least some of the things I've read say that the learnings that they're going to get out of the consumer Teams implementation should make the business Teams application that you and I use, the one we're recording this call on actually, that much more like efficient and less resource intensive and all that, which I know we could probably all appreciate. So it wouldn't maybe use so much resources on our machine. But this has been very interesting, Andy. I think it's been an interesting look back a little bit on where we've been, what some of the current things are that we're doing, and also kind of where we think things are going in the future. So I know, speak for both of us, we would love to chat with more partners and more customers about how we can help them. And if they want to get a hold of us, we'll have something at the end of this video, I'm sure, that will tell people how to get a hold of us if they want to. But any other closing thoughts or comments you want to share with everyone?
No, I just want to thank everyone for the time. I look forward to any follow-up questions, any opportunities you may have to increase your productivity with Microsoft.
Awesome. Thanks again, Andy. Take care.
Thanks, Marcus.